was born in December 30th, 1937 at Doctors Hospital in New York City.
New York City,
Manhattan.
And your dad was a doctor?
My dad was a doctor, and he was an intern, and he was there. And I was born about 2-3 weeks to a month before they came back to Missouri. So actually, I was born on the road because I never lived there. Didn't know anything about it. I grew up in Missouri. And, there were farms and woods, and then there were houses and trees and streets, and an old courthouse with a cannon in the front yard. And Mom and Dad used to square dance. They used to go to these deals where people would get together and dance. They'd hire a fiddler for the evening. And I used to go with them, and it was some of the first music I ever heard that really set me on fire. And I always had fond memories of those dances. And there was a fellow back there named Jess Arthur who used to play the fiddle, and he had one arm, and he had it taken off here, and he had a little plate with a little knob on it, and he had that rigged up on the fiddle bow, and he'd play like this. When I was going to dances with Mom and Dad, I was probably 5-6 years old. And my grandfather had an old fiddle out at his house and kept it in the bottom of the closet underneath the coats. And I was told not to mess with it ever. My grandfather had played the fiddle at one time, but I never heard him. I don't know any idea what he played. But I was told to leave that fiddle alone, but I found that I could crawl in the closet and close that door to just down to about here where I get just a little bit of light, and I could get that fiddle bow out of that case and lay it up on that fiddle like that and pull it back and forth like that and make it go. So I never had any trouble doing that. It seemed like I always knew what the weight of it was to do that. So later on, when I would get an opportunity when they wouldn't be around, I'd take the fiddle out of the closet, try to play on it, and I didn't know how to tune it, but I could make some kind of a tuning on it where I could play Old Bill Clark and stuff like that. And then I got where I could do that pretty good. Then we had there was an old fiddle player, an old fiddle repair man there in town named Peter Bearden, and he had some sons, Doug Bearden and Harry Reeve and Gene Bearden, that all worked for him. They all worked repairing fiddles, and they used to do a lot of work for the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra. But they also worked on a lot of fiddles for old-time fiddlers that were in that part of the country that would bring their fiddles in. And he had an old fiddle, which I still got in the back room, that he gave me one time, and that's one I learned to play on.
What'd your parents say about all this?
Whatever makes you happy. I had great parents. They always both told me, they said it was more important to do what made me happy than anything else, if as a profession or a life's work. But I never considered that I was going to play music for a profession. I just played music because I loved it. And my earliest passion in as far as what do you want to be when you grow up, was to work on the river. It's just that after I got on the river when I was about 16, 17 years old, I realized that the music was really asserting itself on me pretty strong. And as far as reasons, I have a thought for a long time, and just here in the last years, that the reason that I loved it so much the first time I heard it is probably got to do with my Scotch-Irish background. I'm mostly Scotch-Irish with a little bit of German, which is basically what the people that play that music are. So I don't know if that's where it comes from. And I think I first heard Flat and Scruggs in 1952.
And all that was pretty new then. We're talking bluegrass starting in, mid-40s.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Well, I was into fiddle tunes and old, I call it square dance music. first heard Earl Scruggs and Lester Flatt, I knew this was something a little bit different. But that's about that.
What were your contemporaries into
Oh,
that were musicians?
Rock and roll and
well, that was just
music.
beginning, really.
Sure,
I mean, that was only beginning.
Yeah. Well, we didn't even call it rock and roll
No.
back then. No, in fact, it wasn't rock and roll. I'm sorry. It was See the Pyramids Along the Nile. And Johnny Ray. You remember Johnny Ray?
Mm-hmm.
If your sweetheart sends a letter of goodbye. And that's right. And they danced. The big dance craze was to people like Ray Anthony and his orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
And so then, how did it progress from there? How did your interest progress?
And so my cousin, I had a cousin that played music too, that liked that kind of music, and we had a little family band. He and I and his sister, and a guy that went to school was in his sister's class, and we had a little band called ourselves the Missouri Ridge Runners.
Now, do you have brothers and sisters?
I have two sisters.
Do they play music?
Not this kind of music. You know, I had one sister who played violin and took lessons on.
Mm-hmm. And so you had the Missouri Ridge Runners, and where'd that go?
Oh, it was like a little band that we played all through high school.
String band music?
Yeah.
Playing old time?
Yeah. Old time and bluegrass. I wouldn't call it bluegrass back then. But we did Salty Dog Blues and Rolling the Sweet Baby's Arms. And we did, and I played a lot of fiddle tunes, Ragtime Annie and Old Joe Clark and Cripple Creek and tunes like that.
You were playing all the instruments in guitar, banjo, and fiddle?
And I was playing banjo and fiddle mostly. It's interesting. The fiddle I always was able to play the fiddle pretty easily, but the banjo was what I wanted to do, and so I would concentrate on the banjo, and I worked real hard getting everything just right. And it seemed like the harder I worked on the banjo, the better I could play the fiddle. So, and then when I got old enough where I could drive and I started getting professional jobs on playing music, I'd get hired on my fiddle playing ability, and then I'd take the banjo with me and they'd let me play stuff on the banjo. Well, and then I went to work at one of the radio stations and worked there and played music, and then I got a job working for a record distributor and went on the road, and I had a band called the Ozark Mountain Trio with Don Brown and Norman Ford, and we got involved in a television show in Quincy, Illinois. And so we would be playing this television show, we'd been playing road dates, and then I was out working for this record distributor selling records during the week. And then from there I went to work at a radio station up in Clinton, Illinois, and did that, and then went from Clinton, Illinois to KFAL in Fulton, Missouri, and from there to KTCB in Malden, Missouri, and then I got a job, came to Nashville and got a job at WSIX here. And
this is DJing.
Yeah, disc jockey work, and then started playing in the studios and writing, and then starting to work some gigs, and next thing you know, the gigs took over, and I was doing pretty good at that, and then I did an album on RCA Victor and another album on RCA.
What were those first albums?
What?
What were those first albums called?
The first one was called John Hartford Looks at Life. The second one was called Earth, Words, and Music. And these were on RCA, and then the Smothers brothers heard those albums, and on the basis of that, wanted me to come out to California and be a writer on the Smothers brothers show.
Was it just starting, or had it already been going?
It had been going, but they were going to do a summer replacement show. And Tommy had this idea to hire all writers that had never worked as TV writers before, try to bring something fresh into it, which was me and Steve Martin and Rob Reiner and all of us. And so that's how that got started.
What kind of stuff did you write for them?
Oh, I did skits. I wrote. We would have a finale every week, and I would write a song for the finale. Just different things like that. But yeah, picked me up out of Cotton Field, southeast Missouri, It set me down in Hollywood, California, by way of Nashville, Tennessee, and the summer replacement show with Glenn Campbell. We went to #1, and you can imagine what that. It was all of a sudden it was limousine time, you know, limousines and famous people and.
Well, the Glenn Campbell was a summer replacement for the Smothers brothers. Oh, I had forgotten that. Yeah, I remember seeing you on Glenn
That's
Campbell.
how it all got started.
Well, you weren't out in front on the Smothers brothers, were you? Or did you play sometimes too?
I was on the Smothers brothers sometimes too, but mostly I was on the Campbell show, and I think the first thing you saw on the Campbell show when I'd stand up in the audience and start playing the banjo.
I remember you sitting like on a box or something and playing a solo thing or talking to him or
we
something.
would do a thing at the station break where we'd go in and out of the station break that way. Glenn and I would do it out in the middle of the audience. They had a little platform set up, and they would take. It didn't seem so at the time, but I think it could have been a very dangerous time, because you get into a situation like that and you tend to think that it almost lulls you into thinking that not only are you bulletproof, but that it'll go on forever, neither of which is true. I was with Ashley Famous booking at the time, but I can remember riding up in Television City there. I can remember riding up in an elevator with William Morris, agent, who was trying real hard not to look obvious to me like he wanted to get something going, but he was standing over in the corner drumming his fingers on the wall like that, you know. I was going, oh Jesus. You know. And,
how long did that last, that period?
See, we were on that summer, and then we went back. When we went back in the fall, we were doing 2 network television shows right there, back to back, and most of us were on both shows because we shared the same writing staff for the Glenn Campbell show as well as the Smothers show, and it was a pretty heady experience, like I say, because you were hanging out with all these famous people. We'd hang out with them all week because we rehearsed all that week and shot the show at the end of that week, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And while they were doing that, the writers were writing the next week's show. And you got to know people real. I got to know Burl Ives pretty well, and I used to give him a ride home after rehearsal every day.
Seemed like a nice guy.
Yeah, he was a nice guy.
Mm-hmm. So how long did that period of real intense media fame last for that time?
Seemed like a year or two. I went out of that into being booked by Ken Cragen, and then we went into a period after the Smothers got taken off the air. I was with them right up to the time they got yanked off the air, and then after they got taken off the air, I went through a period where I was just doing all of the talk shows in the East. I did David Frost and Mike Douglas and Merv Griffin and Dick Cavett and Johnny Carson, and then later on I did some Letterman stuff when he was on early in the morning, and just a period of doing TV shows.
How much do you think that sort of set the basis of what you do now, of the career, people knowing who you are and all that?
Oh, it certainly set the stage for people knowing who I am. As far as the kind of entertainment and the kind of thing that I'm doing now, what I do is I put it back to, I do what's in my heart. If it works, that's great. If it doesn't work, at least I haven't wasted my time. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm doing what's really in my heart and what I really loved about all of it in the first place, which is the fiddle tunes and the whole.
Yeah, that's what you got to do, I think.
Things.
Otherwise,
so, and I go out and enter fiddle contests on weekends sometime, and that's the worst thing you can do for your career. Hey, but I enjoy it. I have a good time. Fraser and I go. in a way, I'm kind of glad that I went through the Hollywood experience because I don't have any illusions about it. I don't have any fantasies that I need to explode. You know.
What else did you learn from that time period, from doing that, having had that happen to you?
Well, I learned that it's not necessarily happiness. It's an illusion to a certain extent. I'm happier now than I ever was in my life. You know, I think I play better and I feel better about my music. I like what I'm doing better, and I have a real good wife, and I live in a great house on the river. You know, if I was doing the LA thing and had to stay out there, I wouldn't get a lot of the quality time, or the time that I consider quality time, like just being right here with the river flowing by. A lot of that I wouldn't get to enjoy like I do on a day-to-day basis here. Mm-hmm. Hey, I'm from this part of the country and I love it. I love the Midwest, and I love the waters drained by the Mississippi River system and all of that. So I'm glad to be here. Realize I said, well, this is the only place I ever moved away from that I ever moved back to. But see, all of what I love is right here, the river and the music. I mean, for the kind of music I play, this is the most intense place to be. And I've got the river right here too. So, well, I'll give you a real good example of evolving. I got where I didn't like to carry things around in my pants pockets and bulges. I would carry stuff in a wallet and I'd carry it in a back pocket, and then after about a month, the stuff would be so frayed you couldn't see it. So I started carrying stuff up in my shirt. Then I started wearing a sport coat all the time where I could carry stuff in the pockets of the sport coat. And then one day I realized that a vest was really good for that, and I was in a secondhand store and I discovered a railroad conductor's vest. And boy, it was really neat. It had a lot of neat pockets in it, and I realized that I could just wear that and wear it with anything. But then it wore out. So then I found a company in Chicago that made railroad conductors vests. And I had them make me a vest or two with lots of pockets, and they did, and it worked really well. And then they started to wear out. And then that company went out of business. They'd been in business since about 1880, and they went out of business. And I needed some vests to wear. And so one day I hit on this idea of wearing 2 vests or 3 vests to get enough pockets. Well, I did that for a while, and then I thought to myself, golly, I said, what I really want is a cargo vest, but I want it to look like a suit vest. And you can't buy anything like that. So I said, well, I've got to get... So I started wearing these fishing vests and wearing a suit vest over it, and it just didn't feel right or look right. And the fishing vest was just it had a lot of pockets, but it just wasn't right. It had a lot of pockets, but they were too shallow for 3x5 cars and things like that. So I said, finally, well, I've just got to design my own thing. Well, my ex-mother-in-law is a good seamstress, so I took her out of design and everything like that, and we went over it for a couple of days, and then she made me a vest, and it really worked out really well. I've got 2 of them now, and in fact, I got one on one right now. This looks just like a standard suit vest, but inside it's got it's got 2 great big slash pockets that I can carry all kind of stuff in. This is a nice big deep pocket for 3x5 cars. There's 2 more pockets here and another pocket there. And we got the same thing on the other side. This pocket here goes all the way around and back, so I can store documents and stuff back there. But yet, I can just button it up, and it's just like a suit vest.
That's great.
See what I like. It's got a nice old timey look to it.
Yeah.